Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Today is Wednesday. Take two. Today is Wednesday, February 15th, and we have the pleasure and the honor of having a whole bunch of really esteemed guests with us for this weekly Wednesday call. It is a live call, guys, and every single week we'll be doing a different topic. So today we're going to be kicking off this weekly session with Jacera. So over here on my left-hand side is Cranker. I think most people on QSI know this badass from Minnesota. He's been on a ton of calls with us between, us and Cranker with Charlie Ward down here. Over here, my right-hand side, we have Yazka from Finland, all the way from Finland, also broadcasting live on her channel. So thank you for joining us to all of our international crew. Down here on the bottom left, we've got Jeremy from California. Thank you for waking up so early in the morning to join us.
Actually, Washington State.
Oh, Washington State. My bad.
No,
I know you're Pacific time. And then down here on the bottom right, I think this man needs no introduction. We have Charlie Ward joining us today. Yes. So thank you, everybody. For those of you who didn't hear earlier, unfortunately, Jason has hurt his back. So we don't know if he's going to be joining us this morning or not. If he's able to make it, he'll kind of hobble over to the computer and join us later. If not, he sends his regards and he'll be here on the call with us next Wednesday. So that being said, because our QSI group has already been kind of diving into this topic for quite some time, many of us for years and years, I'm not going to go over like presentation style, anything on this call. I think it would probably better serve our audience if we do more like rapid fire Q&A session, because we have a lot of people who actually follow all four of you and follow Jason. So I think everybody's pretty well aware of what's going on, but they have a lot of juicy questions they want to ask everybody. So with that being said, I want to get started with a couple questions in the banking section, like banking/market section, and then eventually transition over to more Jacera, RV, UBI questions. And then if we have time at the end, I know there are a couple of extra, let's call them fun questions for everybody. So with that being said, I want to kick off the call with the first question. And anybody, feel free to answer. And, if anybody wants to tag on to somebody else's question, feel free to do that. And then before we move on to the next question. So the first one will be, what are you guys' thoughts on Robert Kiyosaki's failed stock market collapse prediction yesterday?
Well, who wants to go first?
You go first.
All right. I'll give you my opinion. I don't have this as fact. But I'm just going to throw this out there. When in history have we had that many train wrecks in one day? And what moves all our economic goods around this country in the States here? So in my eyes, this is the beginning of taking down and going through this whole change that we're going to go through. And then we could get into more things there. I mean, if you look at gene decodes, maps of where all the DUMBs are throughout the United States, and it's kind of ironic. I always mention her. Her name's Whamma. She's a badass warrior, and her and I talked about this the other night when the train wrecks are going down on Monday night, and we looked at all the DUMBs, and ironically, they're right over where the DUMBs are. So, Charlie?
I think this is a massive lesson to us all. I was guilty of this 2 years ago, of predicting dates. The one thing I haven't got wrong is the destination. I know the destination. I just don't know the journey. I don't know the dates. One thing I would say to everybody is don't jump all over Robert Kiyosaki. I know him personally. He's a very, very good man. He's a very intelligent man. He is a very wise man. But when it gets to predicting dates like this, I've made the same mistakes because I've been misled. I've been used to put dates out for a specific reason. When I contacted Robert Kiyosaki 3 years ago and asked him to come on my show, he told me at the time he had been told to stay in lane, which tells me that there are people out there that are keeping certain people out of certain things, and he may well have been fed that line to put out there. What we all know is the destination. We all know where we're going. We don't know when it's going to happen. Big things are happening right now, and look, this is why we do this. We're all trying to work out when it's going to happen, because that's what our audiences are all asking. And my answer is, for anybody who watches me, my answer's always been the same. It's going to be done by Thursday. But we just don't know which Thursday. And I've learned to just deal with that. That it will be done when it's done. And the one thing it will be done in God's time. And I'll tell you right now, 100% that God isn't running late, and He never has done. So we just have to learn to live with it. And I'm actually really enjoying the journey now. Simon Parks, I speak to him every day, and he gets into panic mode. And I said, look, just sit back and just enjoy what's happening. There is so much happening, from train crashes to balloons. I mean, there's more balloons than my birthday. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And if you think for 1 minute that you can let a balloon off in China and it'll find its way all the way around the world and then over Canada and over the whole of America, check into a brain surgeon to see if you've got a brain cell left. These sort of things, it doesn't happen like that. And the days of those sort of balloons, by the way, went out 35 years ago. They've got drones the size of flies nowadays. That can send back live pictures anywhere in the world. They've been using them in the wars in Afghanistan to go into buildings where their bosses can sit in their ivory towers and watch these little flies go in and see the enemy. You know, some of the stuff that's happening right now is comical, and it's being done for the pantomime to wake people up. But don't jump all over Robert Kiyosaki. The markets will crash. Which day they crash, it'll be a black day for a lot of people. But to predict exactly what day would be dangerous. Let's put it that way, as we've just seen.
Yeah, Jessica, you want to add that?
Yeah, actually, what I was thinking is that most of us been following Whiplash and his channel, and he's kind of like decodes. And to me, it looks like that the train wrecks and all this happening is just telling us that we are basically going by the book. And that's the kind of a clue that I'm following, that, okay, these are the indicators that we had already like 1 year ago. This was the story that was given to us to follow. And I think that this is how I see it, is that all the markers that we have been given are fulfilling now. And that's kind of, for me, the indication that everything is going according to the plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, I just saw Whiplash popped his head in, so he is joining us live on the on Telegram as well today.
Good
Morning, Whip.
I wanted to say really quickly. So I used to trade the financial markets, and one of the ways that we would know which direction the market's going is by historical data. So if you look at what's happened so far, and you look at what's happened up to each of those events, it's almost like Il Donaldo Trumpo, Dan Scavino, Cash Patel, social media. It's like these guys start hinting at things, and then like months ahead of time. And then all of a sudden it happens, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, did that really just happen? Oh my gosh. And you look back and you see that these guys have been hinting at it for months. So I think when these guys start hinting at, like Robert Kiyosaki, so I don't think it was necessarily about Valentine's Day. It was about getting people used to the idea that there's a change coming, in my opinion. That's what I think.
Yeah, fully agree with you guys. And, you know, kind of reiterating what Charlie was saying earlier, we have been taught to decode events and not dates. And that's something that people need to keep at the back of their mind, because every time you decode dates, it's always been wrong 100% of the time for years and years. So basically stop doing that and look at the bigger picture. And I haven't met Kiyosaki personally. I've been in a bunch of events, and I have a lot of friends who are friends with him. And of course, all of us know he's a big Trumper, guys. So he's on our side. And I want to also reiterate something that Charlie mentioned a second ago. And it's, a lot of the times people are given certain things because that's part of their, let's call it a mission, so to speak, right? Like everyone has a different channel. Everyone has a different way they speak to people. Everyone has a different objective they need to get out. And so it's really no different than, I'll use another example. You know, like we had a call with Charlie a couple weeks ago, and we talked about CBDCs and how it's under white hat control. And yet you have a lot of other truthers out there saying that CBDCs are bad. Which one's right and which one's wrong? Well, it depends on where you're coming from. If your audience has no idea what's going on, they need to first learn that CBDCs were being programmed by the cabal in order to basically take your freedoms and your liberties, and of course your money. But after you get over that hump and you're actually learning about what's the truth behind everything, then the information about CBDCs being taken over by the white hats, programmed, executed by the white hats, and it's a good thing, then that becomes much more realistic and more easy for people to understand. So, at the end of the day, Kiyosaki was probably given some kind of order to say whatever it is that he had to say, and he will probably continue to do so because that's the lane that he needs to swim in, and when we are going to swim in our lane. So thanks, guys, for that. Let's go over
just very quickly, just to make a point there. They don't phone you up and tell you that that you've got to put out this narrative. You get the narrative as if it's real, so it comes across as real. I get inside information from a certain person, and it's told to me as if it's 100% real. It's not a phone call going, you need to push out this narrative. It's put to us as if it's real to make it come across as authentic.
And Charlie, in the backup, what we're saying to you guys, if you haven't seen Charlie's interview with General Flynn on fifth generational warfare, I mean, that's what we're living in right now. Mm-hmm. And, I haven't been doing any decoding on General Flynn. I've been just kind of taking his word. And Emily straightened Andy and I out quickly that Saturday morning after that. And there was all kinds of decodes that were in that interview. And, that fifth generation warfare is what we're in. It's a psyop. It's a total psyop.
Yeah, thanks, Dranker. I'll just say one last quick thing, and then we'll go to the next question. But that's absolutely true, guys. So for those of us who, do have insider contacts, so to speak, and we are given insider information, just like what Charlie was saying, it's given to us in decode too, right? Because nobody's supposed to know what the actual plan is. So it's really up to us to figure out what's going on. And that's so... I'm not going to get into details on this call, but that's the reason why, as an example, if you're already in the stellar sphere and you've purchased Colossal or the Line or Elon Stellar assets, and they're trying to figure out, when are the payments coming, guys, it's still part of the decode. So pay attention to the psyops. And when you understand that, you'll actually piece everything together yourself. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the next question. And this one is for you, Charlie. A lot of people want to know, why did Charlie warn everybody about banks taking people's money? And are the banks controlled by the white hats, yes or no? So I guess this is probably referencing a recent call that you had where you had warned people about taking money out, something like that?
Yeah, very much so. Because I've mentioned in the past that the QFS has already mirrored everybody's funds, people get very complacent. And that's not what we want. And just so that you know, in the last 3 to 4 years, the banks have closed 36 of my accounts. 36 of my accounts. All of my accounts were closed by the banks. All of them. Now, when that happens, there is moments of panic. And I've experienced this. God has made me experience this so I can share this with everybody else. The most important thing that we need to learn is to take responsibility for ourselves, for our actions, for our lives. I've said to people about, if there's no electricity, if there's no water, if there's no food, can you look after yourself for a month? You need to do that. You need to learn to prepare. Now, from a financial point of view, we already know the banks are bailing in, which means they're taking your savings. Forget about taking your pensions. They were taken 3 or 4 years ago. They went a long time ago. That's a Ponzi scheme right now. So they're taking. So my advice to everybody is, it's going to be mirrored. But from the period that the banks go down to the time that the quantum wallets are available, there will be a period of time. And what I'm saying is, don't come to me crying because you've got no money. Because if you've got no money, it's because you haven't prepared. And when people say, well, I don't have any money anyway, sorry, I could actually live for probably $500 for a month for my wife and my son and my mother-in-law. You don't have to be mega wealthy to do that. You cut your cloth accordingly. We have a massive big bags of jasmine rice that we get in from Thailand. They're about $20 for a massive sack. That will last for 3 months. And there's ways to do it. You cut your cloth accordingly. What I'm trying to get people to do is take responsibility for your own money. Take responsibility for your own life and take it away from a corrupt cabal that is trying to steal it. That's all. And so that as we move forward into this new system, you're in the right frame of mind and the right frequency. And those people who just sit there, and I spoke with General Flynn only the other day about things. He said, Charlie, just don't tell the people about the safety net, because otherwise they sit back and do nothing. And he's right. And that's why he said, there is no plan. There is no white hats to get people off their backsides and stand up, because there's only one person who can save you. That's you.
Yeah, 100%, guys. So just remember, and this is part of the decode, most of the people in the world don't know what's going on. So they have to have the public narrative for, well, it's not even the public narrative. The public narrative is everything is great. Everything is, all whatever. The secondary narrative, like the secondary layer of narrative, is what the patriots are learning, right? You don't have to be a Q patriot. You could be a Trump patriot, as an example. And they're the ones learning that everything is bad. So get off your butt and do something about it. And then we have another layer, which is kind of where most of us sit right now. And it's, we know things are going on in the background. And so how do we get above that level of PSYOP? And how do we actually, transmute all this bad stuff into good stuff? So for us, we know that, the banks aren't bad anymore. QFS went live at the end of October last year. And part of the condition of that was that every bank in the world had to either, get up or get out. So they had to become quantum compliant. They had to sign with XRP, Stellar, mint a Stellar asset, sign with SPIA. And so any bank that did not fall in that category, they're done for. They've been closing up a long time ago, right? So the ones that are stayed on, I mean, most of us know, at least the ones in QSI know about the whole CBDC and how they're going to transition over, and eventually they will phase out because they won't need to be around anymore. But that being said, even though we could argue that banks are good these days because they're all white hat controlled, and even if you have like little minions around there running around in their cabal, they're still getting arrested, guys. So it's still happening in the background. But just because that's happening doesn't mean that the banks will go away. So yes, if you don't have money saved, if you don't have money out, rather, you do need to, because when everything does fall, there's going to be that period of time, and we don't know if it's going to be weeks or months. So just have something ready for whenever the big stuff happens, right? So that's about you having responsibility over your own finances. So thank you, Charlie, for talking about that. No problem. Okay, next question is, I know some people who have purchased expensive homes in the last 2 or 3 years, and they still have mortgages on them. So when everything happens and the debts are wiped, do they just get lucky and basically get a free house out of this? Or is that not how this works?
And then there was a long pause because everyone's afraid to jump first.
I don't mind jumping in on this one at all, but if anybody else has got the information, look, I sent across the details that I spoke to you about, that you spoke to me about Nasara Jasara. First of all, a mortgage translates into a death pledge, and they're totally illegal. What they've done is totally illegal. Yes, the answer, in a very simple layman's term, the answer to that question is yes. You will land up having that house, and you will land up having that title to that house, and you will land up having the title to the land, which you've never had before, because the land was always owned through the system back to the Queen of England. Thankfully, she's dead now. So we can take our God-given rights back. It's taken a long time, but the answer to the question is yes, there's a lot more to it than that. And there is a process that we'll go through. We're starting already to see the collapse of the IRS and the dismantling of the IRS. And we're seeing the collapse and the dismantling of the banking system. But I've always said, what we're going through right now is like bringing a ship into harbour. Do not jump off until the ship is tied up.
Good point.
Mentioning that. Oh, go ahead, Cranker.
I also want to add to what Charlie's saying. So, a mortgage, if anyone, we could get into the word salads, that's a whole nother show. But mortgage is death. So, and a lot of people don't understand that when you sign a mortgage and it goes into the banking system, that the banks get paid right away out of your birth certificate bond. So they are paid right away. And then what they do is they borrow you your own money that they've made off of your birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole process of the banking system, it's so fraudulent that
Mm-hmm.
people will just, they will, I mean, there's no other term. They're going to shit their pants when they find out how these banks have been fraudulently given us loans. Every loan that you sign up for is paid for in full out of our birth certificate bond. And then we pay the banks interest. And then
Mm-hmm.
we pay a 30-year mortgage, as Charlie said. So I just wanted to make people aware of that on loans.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, so Jason and I have talked about this for I guess a couple years back before we were on Telegram, but one of the things that people need to know is we are not advocating people go out and buy, tons of $1 million homes. Okay, that's not what this is all about.
No.
Because we don't know when this is all going to flip.
Mm-hmm.
So every month you still got to pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't avoid that until it flips. You don't want to put yourself in a bad position and jeopardize your finances, because I do know, I'm sure everybody on this call knows somebody who's trying to take advantage of that system. And so maybe a couple of years ago, they went out and they splurged on, yachts or cars or houses, whatever. And because it hasn't happened yet, they're now screwed financially. So you don't want to be in that position for yourself. So please, just be very cautious about what you put out into the world, and kind of, do a little bit more self-reflection on what's best for you. And on top of that, if you think about the actual numbers, why would you go and spend, let's say, $10 million on a beautiful home now, when the price of the house is going to go back to 1955 pricing, and you'll probably pick that up for like $20,000?
Mm-hmm.
To me, it doesn't make sense. So I personally would prefer to wait for the crash to happen, have everything convert over, and then pick it up for cheap. But that's just me. All right, next question.
Can I ask one question? Do you think that there will be some kind of a different geographically different places that these crash will be happening? First, I don't know about the American situation or UK situation, or maybe even some African countries. So do you think that all this collapse and the switch will be happening at the same time? Or do you think it's a gradual thing?
I personally think it's going to be gradual but compressed. I think they'll probably announce a couple countries first. And because once you announce one country, a lot of the other ones will topple, because at the back end, the money is all interlinked together. So, as an example, there's a lot of talk about how either Germany or Japan could be first.
That would make sense, because if you look at BRICS that have already gone gold back, and you look at the Russian economy, that's going the other way. Yep. The asset-backed the countries are going the other way. And I think you're absolutely right there, that you're going to look at countries that are not gold-backed. You're going to see the economies of those countries collapse very, very quickly in plain sight. And that is what, from a visual point of view, will destroy the central bank digital currency. Because the central banks are at the hub of the collapse. That's what's being collapsed. Because behind the scenes, they're not going to refloat the central banks. They've already in place got the gold bullion exchange banks in place in every single country, and not just every country, in every state. So there's a lot happening. So we'll see a collapse. And right now there's a huge amount of countries jumping ship. I went through on my show the other day the countries that have already gone with BRICS. People are unaware that the amount of countries I can run through them very, very quickly. The countries that have already gone with Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Where did I put?
Please do, because people are asking me that a lot, which countries are there already, and I think that there are much more than we actually know about them, because the mainstream media is not informing us anything about this.
They're not. The countries that have already gone with BRICS, already gone: Egypt, Afghanistan, Algeria, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Nicaragua, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Senegal, Thailand, the United Arab Emirates, Argentina, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Zimbabwe, Iraq. The one that I loved was the United Kingdom. They've already gone. Not the City of London, the United Kingdom. And then those that are waiting to be entered into BRICS are Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Bolivia, Chile, Cuba, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, Venezuela, Azerbaijan, Mongolia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Turkey, and my favourite, Germany.
Wow.
Because if Germany goes, that's the end of the EU, because it was only the United Kingdom and Germany that ever put in. The rest took out.
Yeah.
Hey,
And
hey, Charlie.
interesting-
Charlie, excuse me, Emily. Charlie, share what you shared with us, with Nick and I on Saturday morning about Texas, because that's really interesting.
Yeah, this is naughty, but it's funny, because the United States, which is not united at all, there are independent states that have applied to join BRICS, of which I can tell you one, which is Texas, which is amazing.
Amazing. We're going to be there soon in Texas.
Oh, you certainly will. Look,
Airbase.
when some countries have always been pioneers, and some countries, none more so, fun enough, believe it or not, than Iraq and North Korea. They had and Cuba. They stood up against the giants. They were going no, and of course they were abused for that. But I love a pioneer. The first two countries that signed up to Nasara Jasara was North Korea and Iran.
And
Well,
that
Iran
list
Iran
that
was,
you were sorry, Jeremy.
Iran was a country that still didn't have. It was only one of the last three that didn't have a central bank, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
So that kind of makes
But
sense.
the list that you were talking about, Charlie, is for me, it's an indication because when I hear those countries' name, I'm thinking about the stellar assets that we already have there. Plus, then those are the traditionally more poorer countries than like Western countries. So I think it makes sense that these poorer countries, they want to join the new coalition, or how do you want to call it, like the new system, because they have so much to gain from that.
74% of the world. I worked it out with General Michael Flynn. 74% of the world now is gone with BRICS.
Whoa, 74. Wow.
74%.
That's awesome.
And that's the part that people need to know, that these countries are now becoming sovereign by joining BRICS.
Correct.
And they're no longer part of the corporation. And a lot of people, we talked about this, Charlie, and I know Emily and I, for those that are new, that are listening, every country was a corporation.
Yep.
Every country was a colony of the crown of the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us the illusion that we were a country, and they made us proud of that flag. So the whole time that we've been going around in our lifetime, we've been all corporations. And, we can go down the rabbit hole on that. That's another, I know we got other questions, but just so you know that those countries that are now joining BRICS, they're taking their sovereignty back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a reminder for everybody who is already in the stellar ecosystem, in order to have, in order for your country, well, I guess it's your bank that's part of the country to have signed on to SPIA, they have to mint an asset. And over here in Stellar World, to have your currency minted is actually going through the Treasury Department, right? So it's not going through a central bank. That stuff doesn't exist anymore, and it definitely doesn't exist in the stellar ecosystem. So that's just another great confirmation that we have there. And then kind of more directly to your question, Yazka, technically every country would collapse at the same time. But I think the question that you're asking more about was, when are we going to find out publicly? Like, what is the public narrative for when they collapse? And so that's why I was mentioning, we've had a lot of information about Japan and Germany coming out. But of course, if people are following Intel Slava, which is the Russian military, they've been putting out a lot of great information earlier, I guess, within the last 1 or 2 days, about how these other countries, so they're talking about, I think Sweden, Norway, and a couple of the other ones are also on the verge of collapse as well, right? But we all know that US is probably one of the biggest ones, and they should be the first one to go. But Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, or remind me, but it seems like they want to wait for the US to be the last one to be announced, not the first one to be announced.
I don't know the plan, and it's far too dangerous for me to commentate on in which order. But there at the moment we're going through the exposure, and I keep saying this to my wife when things happen, because I said that these things would happen 2 years ago, and I said, well, why hasn't it happened? And they said, because people actually need to see it. And that's what we're going through right now. We're seeing. America needs to see. Without being divisive, the Democratic voters need to see this, because what we want after this is not division. We want people to come together. We want people to come together for the greater good and get back to the days that you used to vote. Forget for Democrats or Republicans. Vote because I can feed my family. I can clothe my children. I can pay my bills. I can keep my house warm in winter and cool in summer. The basic fundamentals. That's what we used to vote on. We voted for people that gave us a better quality of life. Since then, we've jumped into this bandwagon of hatred of one person, love of another. So what they did was, what the deep state and the cabal did was, they handpicked people that they knew people would love. None more so than Ukraine. This guy was a comedian on television that the Ukrainians loved. Perfect. We'll take him. He's got no experience in being a politician, but he can do as he's told, because the producers of television told us he's brilliant at doing as he's told. He'll make a great leader because he'll do as he's told. And this is all they've ever wanted. People who do as they're told so they can get their agenda out.
100%. All right, let's go to, let's kind of transition over to more the RV Jacera questions. Mm-hmm. And the first one is, does the market need to crash before the RV happens?
Yeah. In very simple layman's terms, yes. Because I liken it to when you clean out a fish tank. You don't start putting water in until it's thoroughly clean. And that means getting everything out of the bottom.
100%.
You know, Emily, you and I had a conversation yesterday regarding the RV. And a lot of people are wanting the RV to happen. Listen, we all want the RV to happen. And Charlie's touched on, what inner work have you done to accept that amount of money? And what are you going to do with that abundance? I don't even like using the word money. But for all those so-called Intel guys that are out there pushing that it's going to happen this day, it's going to happen this day. You and I talked about it yesterday, and we said exactly what just Charlie said. It will not happen until the market crashes, because if you think that you're going to put that money into the banking system and it's corrupt, they would have stole it. And for those that thought they've been waiting for years and years for this. If you thought you were going to get your RV money during the Bush administration, during the whole Obama administration, while the Clintons were involved, you're absolutely fooling yourself, because they would have stole all that money. So it's just like what Charlie said. We got to clean the whole tank out, and we got to sterilize it before we put the new liquidity back in the aquarium.
It's biblical. You don't put new wine into old skins.
There you go.
I always laugh on Telegram, because people always say, like, oh, this is the greatest wealth transfer of all time, and it is. But you can't say it's a wealth transfer and then expect to get the money before the transfer.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Like, it's here and it's got to go here, so it's not going to be here till it leaves here. Like, it's
some people have already spent it, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Very true. Very good point. So I want to piggyback off of that, because it kind of ties into the next question. People are wondering, it's going to be, like what RVs first? And what we've all been told is that the metals have to RV first, guys. So when you crash the market, they have to move it somewhere. But in order to have everything kind of boom, the metals have to go first, because you have to look at commodities, right? It ties back to Bretton Woods 3. When you have metals and commodities backing up both the physical and the digital currency, that has to go before these go. You can't put the cart before the horse. And so look for metals to RV first. That's going to trigger, because of Bretton Woods 3, both physical and digital currency RV, and you can't do it the other way around. there was like a little sub question in there. What about the UBI? Will the UBI come before or after that? Now, I kind of have two different thoughts about this. The main UBI that I think everybody is really looking for is going to be after, right? Because you have to kick in Jacera fully. They have to announce it, and that's going to be part of the system. But I do think that there is a possibility we might get little baby UBIs in the form of some other kind of disguise. So for instance, like in Ukraine, they've been testing, with the Stellar ecosystem, all these different wallets pushing money over there. And so that's one version of a super tiny baby UBI for people who are hurting. And they've been talking about doing that possibly for other areas as well. And that's the reason why just yesterday, 2 days ago now, the 13th, Stellar was actually invited to speak in front of CFTC. And the one thing they presented, they had like a 5-minute presentation window. And the one thing they talked about was actually Stellar Aid Assist, because that's going to gear up the concept of pushing out UBIs to the whole entire world, right? So you can have like a little, maybe possibly a baby one like the CARES Act, but CARES Act, version 2, and then the real UBI coming down later down the track.
So Emily, let's for those that don't know what a UBI is, that's universal basic income, and that money is going to come from what has been owed to us, what they've stolen from us. So people need to know that's not socialism. It's the money that they already stole from us that's coming back to us.
Not income, right? Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
I was just going to say it's very, very important that it's dripped back and not flooded back, because if it's flooded back, it will destroy people's lives.
Yes.
And they won't know what to do with it. If it comes back in gently so that it eases the pressure off you, and then you learn how to live with having an abundance, then you'll appreciate it, and it'll grow, all depending on how you live your life. And it's not by human control. This is off-planet control that will watch what you do with your money. And I've lived through that for the last year. The more I do for humanity, the more God puts on my plate. He's got an incredible sense of humor.
It seems like
I remember actually a few years ago we had this experiment in Finland. They were testing they were selecting certain people to test the UBI. It was actually very minimum. I think it was maybe around $600-700 equivalent, and I don't know what the results were, but I remember people were at that point talking that it's kind of like a deep state programming that we are getting used at, that thought that we are getting money without doing anything. And there were a lot of resistance in Finland. I remember that, because people were kind of like thinking that, oh, you shouldn't get free money. And it's kind of like the attitude that we're being conditioned to, that we always have to work hard for even a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jeremy, wanted to add something?
Well, Trump's always saying the diamonds have to be returned. And so it's one thing to have, free money, but it's another thing to have, in a sense, reparations, like what was ours given back. And obviously you can't, like Charlie said, you can't flood it, because you can't have overnight lottery winners, of course, but getting people used to the idea that, like, we always say that we're valuable, but we don't realize how valuable we really are. They understood, the cabal understood. Mm-hmm. So I think people are going to start learning that as we go forward,
I have an important question, and this is to Charlie, because I don't know anybody who been able to explain it to me, that if we have a kind of like a birth fund, mm-hmm. that has been assigned to all of us, mm-hmm. so who has assigned that fund to us initially?
Well, it was set up by the Phoenician families many, many years ago, of which the top of the Phoenician families was the Pacer family, which translates into paymasters. Their assets were also secured 3-4 years ago. They were seized 3 or 4 years ago. There is 13 Phoenician families that were all arrested back then, and they had their puppets out there, which was the line of the Bilderbergs, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. A lot of people thought the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers were the top of the tree. They weren't. They were a level down or 2 levels down. They were the people out there, and then Soros was the layer down below that. all the money went back to the Phoenician families. And when they seized the assets of the Payseur family, forget the rich list, these people, the assets that were seized was 34 quadrillion. And that was all of your my money, etc. And it's absolutely shocking, but thank God it's been seized. But everything went back, whether it was mortgages, whatever it was. And when you start breaking down the taxes and everything else from America that went through the Vatican and then went to the City of London, to the Queen of England. I mean, there's a lot of Americans who will wake up and go, what on earth was it going there for? I mean, that was money laundering at its absolute worst. And it was a complete and utter scam. So yes, it all went back in through the banking system, through because the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers controlled the banking system. I'm going to make one little point here about the way we've been misled, because it's relevant to the whole grand scheme of things as to how the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers created this system that just stole the money from the people. Rockefeller, by the way, when they first found oil, it was used for greasing parts, and then they realized that they could actually refine it into a product that would make things move, such as petrol and diesel. And the big lie is it is not a fossil fuel.
Nope.
It never has been a fossil fuel. It's a mineral fuel, and there is an absolute abundance of it. But the Rockefellers made out that it was very, very scarce and it needed to be charged at a certain amount of money. And that's where they started in fact, they originally started making their money out of the transportation of it, then realized that they could because they had so much control, they realized they could do this. And it's the same with the banking system, the banking, the oil, many, many, many other things will come to light on how these corrupt people at the top of the tree who've controlled the money it's all filtered back, and we've all seen their pyramid. It all goes right up to the top, and they were at the top of the tree. And at the moment, we're inverting that right now. We're turning it upside down. But when we turn it upside down, the most important thing is not to damage society, but to make it constructive. I retired when I was 40 years old. I'm 62 now, 63 this year. And after 1 week, I was bored senseless. And I've been working harder and more hours since I retired than I did when I was working. And I worked long hours then because I enjoy it. And there's a lot of people out there that go, well, if I get free money, I won't do anything. Good luck. I mean, you'll get absolutely bored. Once you learn that you can do good things with your money and not just buy Ferraris, Lamborghinis, boats, planes, and everything else. Once you start helping humanity, the fulfillment from helping other people is so rewarding that that's better than any drug you'll ever take in your life, helping other people. And that's where we need to get to. So I hope that answers your question about where the money's gone to for our Finnish audience. And we've got a lot of support from Finland.
So
Yes,
Charlie,
actually, thanks for clarifying that. Actually, my question was more relating to the origin of the people's money, like who gave the original fund for each and every one of us. I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but
our birth certificates were a commodity. So you were lost at sea at birth. You were dead. And what they did was they took your birth certificate and they made it into a corporation and traded you based on what they thought they could get back from you in your lifetime.
Right.
As a commodity.
Yes.
And then this is why you can't get your birth certificate. You can get a copy of it. And if you want to get your birth certificate, it'll take you about 2 years. And when you get it, it'll break your heart to see where you've been traded around the world for millions and millions of dollars while you've lived life poor. Well, a lot of people have lived out there in poverty. And yet their birth certificate is worth 5-10 million pounds, 100 million pounds. I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's how they started. You were created, you were lost at sea at birth, and then they created a corporation in your name, and you were traded based on what they thought at the start you'd be worth in your life, in tax, in interest, in everything. And that's just grown out of proportion now.
Right.
So,
Okay.
FYI,
In the
future-
backup, I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if it's going to be like in a week or two or so, but we're going to have like on this Wednesday weekly call, one of the topics is going to be about sovereignty. And so we're going to have, everybody talk about that in more detail on that call.
Yeah, so the backup what Charlie's saying is this. Everyone that's listening, look at your driver's license, look at your utility bill, look at your phone bill, all your bills, look at your birth certificate, the copy of your birth certificate. Everything is in capital letters. And this goes back to the United States of America was all capital letters because that was a corporation in Washington, D.C. And they turned us into a corporation, unbeknownst to our mother and father. They had us sign a birth certificate. They took a footprint from us, and then they took our mother's placenta. So this whole thing, you guys, when you finally find out the truth, which I've gone down the rabbit hole and many of us have, I mean, everything I'm giving you is a collage of people behind me that have gained this knowledge. But we've all been turned into nothing more than cattle. We are no different than an Angus beef coming through the gates and everyone's bidding on us. And just to prove my point, we've come across people that when they've had a child and they were born with a disability, guess what? Their birth certificate's in lowercase numbers. They never turn that person into a corporation because they can't make any money off of them. Isn't that sad?
Mm-hmm.
The way I understand it about the origination of the money of earth is the Bible says that the earth and the fullness thereof belongs to God. Mm-hmm. Everything in it belongs to him. And if we're his children, then that makes us heirs. And if we're heirs, then that means we technically can control the wealth that God owns. And the proof of that is the begats, right? In the Bible, this one begat that one and begat that one and begat that one. Those are all the trustees of the trust that God set up with Adam. So from the beginning of time, they've been trying to steal everything in that trust because it's God's money. That's why we're going back to gold and silver, right?
That's right.
Can I have one follow-up question relating to those trusts? And because I've heard the name white spiritual boy coming out very often. So can somebody please clarify me, what does it mean? Is it a person or trust, or how does it relate to all this?
I can talk about that one because I have been working with that particular file. There was a spiritual wonder boy fund, which was a Filipino boy that was living and working in Africa. And he was spiritual. He sensed that everyone was going to steal from the Filipino people and from the African people. And he set up a fund which he put a lot of assets into. They put a lot of assets because they knew that they had wealth in Africa, and they had lots of things that were put into this fund many years ago. And part of the terms and conditions of that fund is that it could only ever be used for the Filipinos and those in the continent of Africa. That was written into it. Now that fund, I have to be very careful what I say because I can't say too much, was managed, controlled by the Knights Templars. And at the moment, that fund is under the control of the Quantum Financial System team. So that there will be a time when that fund, and the reason that it's under the hands of the Quantum Financial System team is quite simple. That if it was the Knights Templars way, they'd have all that money away very, very quickly. And this is why this has taken longer than a lot of us would have wanted. They're being very careful that the money goes to the right people. The people of Africa and the people of the Philippines deserve it because they have been robbed blind. And this young man who set up this fund, you don't need to even ask me the question. He's one of God's children that God spoke to.
Thanks
So,
for clarifying that. Yeah.
one interesting thing to kind of note and piggyback off of that is you'll start to notice over time that, well, I mean, I think most people have seen the bigger picture. Whenever you have a cabal-led whatever organization, company, etc., in order for that to actually go towards the people, that organization gets taken over by the white hats. So using that same formula, that's actually been trickling down into like the RV communities and stuff like that as well. Because if you have somebody who is, let's just say, not like this group that we have here, then they will also get taken over at some point, and that fund will also be redistributed back as well. So, okay, I want to switch over to this question because I've actually heard this asked probably countless times for the last couple of years, and it's if you have no debt, how will they determine your UBI, and does everybody in the world get the same number, or will there be differences?
Well, look, I've never had a debt since I was 23. I'm 62, 63 this year. I don't borrow money. I come from a farming mentality where if you can't afford it, you don't buy it. And if you can't afford it, then you work a bit harder so you can afford it. And that part of my life doesn't bother me. The fact that I haven't got debt and I'm not going to be every single day I've bought something that has value added tax on it. Every single day. Every single day I buy an airline ticket, it has tax on it. There's lots of taxes that we'll get back, and there's lots of that has been stolen from us. I have had private insight as to what's coming back to us. And I'll tell you what, if you were 2 years old today, you couldn't spend it in your lifetime if you lived to 100 years old, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, this question is more about, or at least the way I'm interpreting this question is more about when you actually go through the RV appointment. And it says, Charlie, can you tell us what bank card you use? Do we choose Wells Fargo or HSBC from an American bank that can handle all the RV currencies? Or is there maybe some way to elaborate on digitalization of assets? So I think they're asking like how, like when you go for the actual RV appointment, how are they transferring it physically over to you?
I wouldn't worry about that because every single person will have a one-on-one meeting. And when you have a discussion about your money with your person to do with this, you will have somebody there from off planet who'll be overseeing it, and they will give you the advice that suits you. Don't come to Charlie Ward for that advice.
If I have to take a stab at this, guys, I would say it would probably come in one of two different options because we do know that they're testing Stellar for UBIs, right? So if you have a Stellar wallet set up, or even if you don't, they can actually the bank can create one in your name, and all you have to do is actually just open up your account, and that's part of the post about claimable balances that I made a couple months ago. And then the secondary portion of this is, if you've been paying attention in the news, a lot of the credit card and more specifically the debit card companies are working with these various banks and with the ISO 20022 blockchains. And so they're setting up. Mm-hmm.
You could actually answer me a question because I was at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago for dinner a few weeks ago, and a lady, I'm not even going to guess her age, but she was older than me. She said to me, Charlie, I understand all of this, but when I open my wallet, my physical wallet, what's going to be in there? And for the older people of our audience, which there are millions of people that are old people who are watching us, they're so used to money in their wallet. Obviously, you and I both know about rainbow currency for the foreseeable future, and that's what I explained to her. But what would you say to that question?
Well, to that specific lady, we will have both for a period of time. The way that I understand it is the physical rainbow notes will be there as a bridge for people to kind of get used to this digital system. Now, I don't know what the time frame looks like. I don't know if they'll phase it out after 2 years, 10 years, 50 years, whatever it is. I just know the ultimate, the end goal is to get everything onto the digital version of it because that's the best way to track everything. But it's also for people's personal safety as well. If we have a card that we're walking around with or our phones that we're walking around with, we can very safely keep trillions of dollars in there because people can't access it. You know, it's unhackable. That's part of the whole quantum system. But if you're carrying a physical wallet with $1 million in there, you'd want to have some pretty heavy security backing you up. So that's another big reason why we're all moving to the digitalized arena. But to kind of finish my train of thought earlier, so I do know that a lot of these debit card companies are working with the various blockchains, and they're also working together with the Federal Reserve. Remember, this is the white hat controlled Federal Reserve, guys, and they're instituting a program where you can have multiple. How do I describe it? It's like multiple on and off ramps. So for instance, like even if it's a Wells Fargo card, you could probably off ramp it through, this is just an example, don't quote me on this, but let's say you could off ramp it through PayPal, or you could off ramp it through Stellar, or you could off ramp it through Zelle, right? So these are just examples. And this is actually part of what they were talking about last year to get in place. I believe the deadline for that is July 1st of this year. They need to all have multiple off-ramping capabilities and interoperabilities. So that's going to be interesting to watch out.
Emily, can I jump in here a second? Because Charlie mentioned off-world technology. You're talking about blockchain. We're talking about the quantum system. I think it's important when you say white hats that people understand. I mean, we've come along this far, that the Galactic Federation is part of the white hat, and that this new money system is unhackable, you guys. It's 100% unhackable, and it's 100% transparent. And when people say, you know, and this is, I want to get rid of the fear. When people say, well, I don't want to go to digital currency because I don't want to be tracked. Ladies and gentlemen, you're being tracked right now.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you do is 100% digital. Your debit card, your credit card, your bank transfers, your bank account, everything, including a check. I had this conversation yesterday with one of the Angel Warriors. People don't even realize that a check is an electronic transfer. The bottom is a MICR Inc. code. There is your bank routing number and then your account number. The banks take your checks and they randomly, at the end of the day, they call it batching them. They batch them through. All the funds are done. They're all transferred within 24 hours. So when you deposit a check into a bank and they say this check may not be available for you for 5 to 7 business days, it's all bullshit. Mm-hmm. They're using your money to invest. They're using your money all the time. So I just want to let everyone know that this new quantum system is 100%. It's going to be totally transparent. It's totally safe. And when those people say, well, I don't want people to know what I'm doing, there's only one person that knows what you're doing, and that's God. Mm-hmm. So God's watching everything.
Well, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, the blessing of the Lord maketh one rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. So if this is God that's going to bring this blessing, then it's not going to come with the sorrow of the cabal still being attached to it, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like Charlie told us before, they can just close up 30 or 40 accounts just like that if they decide. Mm-hmm. So I don't really understand the FUD from the digital ID and stuff, because we've been tracked so much for the whole time. And I think that this is kind of like I mean, of course, if you're a criminal, then it's not a good thing for you. But for us, I think it's, I mean, like, I'm welcoming it with open heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. All right. I know we started a couple minutes late. Do you guys have maybe like another 10, 15 minutes to spare?
Yeah. I got all morning if need be.
Yep. I know we had that other call with Charlie after this as well.
We get those notifications, Emily. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, so let's jump to some of the fun ones before we end the call then. There are 4, and some of them are pretty quick. When can we expect to have access to med beds?
That's a very simple answer. As soon as the green light for the QFS with the USN goes live, that will then tell us that the USD is dead. That's the critical part, because that's the controlling part, if you like, of the old system. So once we get the green light on that, and we're not that far away from that, but because of the fact that the legal system is so involved in this, big pharma, have put laws and rules in place that you couldn't even dream of. I mean, back in the 1930s and 40s, they made it illegal to find a cure for cancer, which carries the death penalty. That's what we're up against. They've tied it up so tight. So all of these things have to be untied before they can release the med beds. They are in place. They're ready to go. They're just waiting for these pieces to be undone. When they're undone, they'll be available very, very quickly.
I was just going to say, Charlie, because the decodes right now, a lot of decodes are showing the takedown of big pharma is like not very far off. And I can't imagine that the white hats would take down people's ability to get medications without having something immediately ready to replace it.
They have.
So, because here in Finland, we have a person who states already that they have a kind of like already agreed finance and all just this almost go sign. So I interpret that that's possible, but there's no certainty yet, right?
No, nobody knows the time.
And I'm gonna go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Cranker, go ahead.
Are you sure? You go ahead. Well,
your turn. You go.
No, I'm gonna ask the question of the elephant in the room, because I know a lot of people that are watching and that'll watch the recording of this, because I bring this up often. If the corporation is dead, which we know it is, why are we still going to the unlawful court systems? That's the part that just blows my mind to this whole process, this plan. If the corporation's dead, then maritime law is dead. Then our courts should be totally non-relevant. We should be just going back to the common law. But I don't know if that transition period is there, or we don't know what's going on behind the scenes of what the military and the white hats are doing with the criminals within our legal department. I don't know that, but I'm just asking that question. I don't have the answer to it.
I do,
but
it's one word. It's one word. It's dead easy. Pantomime.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
I was just going to say.
I just wanted to ask that.
You said we're watching a movie, so and I'm learning how real that statement really
exactly is. It's pantomime.
No doubt.
Some of these distractions are so ridiculous. I mean, so ridiculously like not going to happen in any other scenario of real life. I mean, you know, China's not going to.
What do you guys make of then? What do you guys make of the Ohio thing? Is it like a real thing?
I want to add something to the medbed situation first, Yaska.
Okay.
I can't remember which publication put this out, but I remember seeing an article. I want to say like in the last 12 hours or so, and I believe it was referring to Australia, and they've already made this public, to the masses, that something like a med bed will be coming to Australia. I believe they're putting them into the children's hospitals first, and it's supposed to cure them of all the diseases and sicknesses, right? So when you look at that, that is med beds, right? So they're letting people know, and from how I understand it, if I remember this information correctly, Australia and New Zealand actually have the highest rate of cancer in the whole world. And it has something to do with like the copper in the pipes or something like that, like watch the water essentially. And so that makes the most sense to me why they would come to Australia first, and then help to heal the children first, because they didn't have a choice in any of this, and then eventually it'll kind of get spread, I'm guessing, to the rest of the adult population, and then it'll obviously get shared to the rest of the world. And if I remember that article, I think they did confirm it was coming this year, but I don't know if they mentioned any months on that article or not.
Wasn't there something in the last $1.7 trillion Congress deal for? Wasn't there something about med beds in there? Correct me.
There was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I glanced, I saw it, but I didn't look deep into it. I just saw it, and then 107 touched on it, and I was like, "That's the second time I've heard that now."
Yeah, it was like a DoD, I think it was a DoD or something like that budget report. There was a clause in there. I did post on it, but I don't remember
Okay.
exactly what the
I
details
can
are.
go. Yeah, I can go back and look and reshare it.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
One more thing about the medbed. So, Charlie, maybe you know more about this. That do you know how many different units there will be? Will there be many units in one country, or will there be only one unit that the military is looking after, or how do you reckon it goes?
No, there's three different types of med beds, three different types, and there will be an abundance of med beds around the world. There's no shortage of them at all. It's not a question of just one for Texas or one for Arizona or whatever. There are plenty of them around, and they're more than covered. But there are three different fundamental types, and in very simple layman's terms, they work on two different things: frequency and stem cell technology.
They're AKA ventilators, right, Charlie?
I was just going to say that you took the words right out of my mouth, because I heard that, but I didn't know if that was true. I wanted to see if any of you guys had heard about every time Trump mentioned how many ventilators they made in 2020.
Yeah, it's tied to the Foxconn comms from like 1 or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's another fun question. Does anybody have an idea of what the Seven Kingdoms will consist of? Like which countries are under which kingdom?
Well,
That was my question a year ago.
That's a naughty one, because because when I asked that question, they teased me by saying that the United Kingdom would come under Putin, and that just made me smile.
It's funny you say that, Charlie, because today I literally thought, who is getting Europe? And I was like, what if Russia gets Europe?
That's what they were saying. That's what they were saying. Look, I don't have a problem. You need a strong leader if you've got that many countries. Russia's got 11 time zones. Let's get real. And it's 11 time zones full of crazy people. I mean, the Russians, they're a strong-minded bunch of people. And if you had any of the Western leaders running Russia, there'd be anarchy years ago. You need strong people. You need strong people like Saddam Hussein. Whether you love him or hate him, he kept Libya, Syria, and all this under control for many years. Iran, Iraq. You need strong people. You need strong leaders. And if you step out of line, you need to be told. But what's happened in the West is we've had weak leaders, and we've got a complete and utter chaos.
That's what I've been thinking. Like, what will happen to Europe? I mean, like, we have been under the leadership of Russia here in Finland, and we've been under Sweden as well. So I think that somebody's going to grab us all and just put us in the package and throw them and ship us on the Soviet side.
Forget about the 7 different areas. Just think that we're all under one God. That's it.
I think, Charlie, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're going to come into a period where I've got the American flag flying behind me, but I think eventually that's not going to matter anymore. We're all going to be brothers and sisters and child of God.
Yeah, exactly. But the land masses will be the borders will be redefined on a grand scale, and it's already happening.
And wasn't it so that you won't be needing any passports or travel documents to move from place to another? So,
a passport, you pass a port, and a port is normally either an airport or a seaport, and this all comes under maritime law.
Yep.
When we come under God's law, we need a God pass.
Just another bond they create for you. Another bond.
Mm-hmm.
It'll most likely manifest itself in some kind of NFT or NFT modification thereof. So that's, I think, where we're going with this, because I know it's going to be tied to government ID at some point, just like it's going to be tied to our healthcare IDs and stuff like that. But I want to add that, so this information is coming from Whiplash. And I haven't talked to him in too much detail about that, but from the way that I understand how he has put it, and I'm sure, people might maybe seen some of this posted as well, is when Trump comes back as president, right, and John is VP, it's only going to be for a short period of time. Now, I don't know if that short period of time is weeks or months, but from my understanding, it's not going to be years. Because what's going to happen is Trump's going to step down, John's going to step up and become the president. I don't know who's going to be VP under John Jr., so don't ask me that. But what gets more interesting is Trump will become the king of the world. So in my opinion, I interpret that as the king of the seven kingdoms.
And Emily, just to be clear, because you kind of didn't really say it, but you meant John Jr. Kennedy, correct?
Yes.
For those that are listening, it'll be a glorious time.
Yes.
And I wanted to say about earlier too, if anybody's watching that are like some of the folks on my channel that are worried about Putin, I just always show this right here because those two guys aren't the same person. Sorry.
No, exactly.
And when you listen to them, I mean, one has a little bit of a lisp and the other one talks like really well. So there's that.
It's so
Guys,
that I don't
one of
understand how
the-
people don't really see it. It's amazing.
It's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
But the people just don't see it.
Yeah, President Putin right now is probably one of the greatest white hats that people will ever understand, know, learn about, because they all have their own part and they're all doing fantastic work. But Putin and the Russians have really taken upon themselves to physically clean out the Khazarians all over the world. And that's an extra feat that a lot of the other white hats are, luckily not really having to shoulder that kind of burden and responsibility, which is one of the big reasons why we're always saying, Russia leads the way, because physically they're leading the way in more ways than one.
And Emily and Charlie, I think it's important because so we share this video with others. They have to understand Trump never left us. And Q is real. The Q team is real. And this is the largest sting operation in the history of mankind. Right, Charlie?
It is. And when I was in New York, I decided to visit Trump Tower. I actually put the little short video as I walked into reception to the seal of the 45th. How many flags do you think there are down the side on the flag on the walk to the seal?
17.
17 flags. That's not a coincidence.
17th letter of the alphabet.
17th letter of the alphabet. And look, I did a huge study on Q because when I started this journey, because we got questioned so much about it, and of course everybody knows it that Donald Trump has been using it. They knew that JFK used it. It turns out that I went back to, obviously, Abraham Lincoln used it. And then you go back and find it. It was a book that was removed from the Bible, the book of Q. I mean, you can't make this stuff out. And that was the words of Jesus Christ in the book of Q. So for those, there will always be unbelievers and disbelievers and all the rest of it. But the truth resonates within each and every one of us. And when it resonates within you, you feel peace. And if you're not feeling peaceful, it's because you're connected to a lie right now.
Yeah. And I think this was around Christmas time. I had put a D class out there. So I've been basically monitoring FBI, CIA, and a couple of the other intelligence agencies on a number of social media platforms, including LinkedIn. And so I was looking at some of the CIA posts, and the CIA themselves confirmed that they are working with Q Team and that they're taken over by the White Hats and everything's going into blockchain. So I put that post out there, and it basically, if you go back and you read through it, it'll prove to you that Q isn't just real and awesome. It was intricately tied to the DNI, the Department of National Intelligence in America. So that's why they can't go after it, because it's as high as it gets. Okay, so we have two final questions. Charlie, this first one is for you. I can answer the first one. Are you in Africa at the moment? No, because I recognize that background of yours. But so more importantly, when are you scheduled to go and when does your NDA expire? Everybody's dying to know.
I will go when I'm told to go. I mean, very, very simply, when there's funds available because once I go under, once the funds flow, I will not be allowed to tell anybody. So I told my Insiders Club that the moment you see me in Africa, you'll know the funds are flowing because I'll be there with Michael Tellinger. Starting off, he's already started one small town that's already well underway. He's doing an amazing job. He started also in Beirut in the Lebanon. So he's doing amazing work. But when I will go down to South Africa to see him. So if you see me in South Africa, I promise I won't be going there on holiday to deceive you. That's not going to happen. My wife's already booked this year's holiday, and it's not in South Africa. So when you see me down there, you know that things are happening because I won't be allowed to tell you. I'll just be talking about what the humanitarian projects that are ongoing.
Perfect.
Can I ask one question about the RV? Because somebody mentioned that the RV would be done against the Russian ruble. That would be kind of like the measure. So, do you think that will happen?
That's not true. The RV, the revaluation of currencies, will be done against gold. So 1 gram of gold will be worth 1 ruble, 1 peseta, 1 sterling token, 1 US note, 1 bolivar, 1 zim, 1 dinar, 1 dong. That is how the